Whole Hog Sports presents the basketball podcast of Mid-America, the premier Arkansas Hoops podcast, brought to you by Landers Toyota of Northwest Arkansas. With Whole Hog Sports basketball analyst Scotty Bordelon, here's your host, Matt Jones.
March Madness is here. The Razorbacks will play Vermont on Thursday in Buffalo in the first round of the NCAA tournament. The Razorbacks are the number 4 seed in the West region. Vermont, the Catamounts, the winner of the America East Conference, is the number 13 seed in that region. The winner of Thursday's game will advance to play Saturday in Buffalo against either UConn or New Mexico State. Matt Jones with Scotty Bordelon and Andrew Joseph of Whole Hog Sports. And Scotty is our man on the ground in Buffalo right now. Scotty, what's it like up there?
Oh, I'm hoping to see the sun before I come back home. Over the weekend, it is overcast and cold, and I'm a little bit away from downtown Buffalo. Hotel rates were not cheap close to the arena, so we did what we could. Doing good. I got to my hotel 3 hours before check-in, so I got to sit down, and as soon as I opened my laptop, I saw that JD Note had been named a third-team AP All-American. So as soon as I got here, got to work, and excited for the next few days. I went to the NCAA tournament in 2018, but I think I showed up the night before Arkansas's first game and then waited, I think, pretty much all day for Arkansas to get pounded by Butler, and it was a pretty quick trip. Maybe it'll be different this time around, but yeah, I'm excited to get going and get started on some interviews on Wednesday.
Yeah, Arkansas keeps getting sent up near the Canadian border for these NCAA tournament games. That one in Detroit, this one in Buffalo. You know, usually they try to keep the top 4 seeds close to home. That's the objective of the NCAA tournament selection committee, but it's not always doable, you know, based on where sites have been pre-selected several years in advance. And Arkansas and Texas Tech are really the 2 top 4 seeds who got the shaft, if you will, in terms of, you know, being sent far away from home. The Razorbacks, of course, going to Buffalo. Texas Tech, there was a regional in Fort Worth, but Baylor and Kansas, who were both number 1 seeds, they get sent there. And so Texas Tech is being shipped out to San Diego for its first round games. It's a little unfortunate for Arkansas because of the type of season that they had, Scotty, but really outside of Fort Worth, there weren't a whole lot of sites that were just real close to Arkansas. I mean, Indianapolis, that's probably a drive that people could make from Arkansas. But outside of that, you're looking at a plane ride anywhere you go.
Yeah, so me and Bob on Sunday morning, you know, several hours before the selection show, he called me while I was at church, and we were just trying to figure out kind of what our plan of action would be, you know, if Arkansas got sent to Fort Worth or Indianapolis. And we were like, if it was one of those 2 places, you know, we were probably going to drive together. Those were obviously places that Arkansas fans could get to pretty easily. You know, I think they're going to show up in Buffalo too. I know Eric Musselman wasn't. I think he voiced kind of his, I don't know if it was frustration, but he was a little bit irritated at the fact that, you know, UConn is a possible weekend opponent for Arkansas, and they're not too far from Buffalo. And Vermont, you know, it's like a drivable distance for Arkansas to like Fort Worth, I would imagine. Or somewhere between Fayetteville and Indianapolis along that route to Buffalo. So, and it's St. Patrick's Day, so there's going to be lots of green in the building on Thursday. Looking forward to a pretty interesting game in that one. I know we'll get into Vermont a little bit later. It's a pretty good team that's used to winning and winning by pretty comfortable margins. They haven't lost in regulation since early December, so. I think Eric Musselman, obviously, anytime you get to the NCAA tournament as a 4 seed, like Arkansas has been a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament 2 years in a row. That's something, it's kind of a feather in your cap, something that you can, you know, tell recruits, you know, down the line, like, we're not just getting to the tournament, but we're, you know, last year we made a run. This year, you know, we're back and, you know, a 4 seed. I think the toughness of this team, both mentally and physically, is going to help Arkansas here, because there's going to be, you know, lots and lots and lots of people in Buffalo that are rooting for Arkansas to go home early.
Now we'll preview Arkansas and Vermont, but first, real quick, we'll take a look back at the SEC tournament in Tampa. Arkansas beat LSU 79-67 in its quarterfinal game. That ended up being Will Wade's final game as LSU's head coach. He was fired, I think it was the next day or maybe 2 days later after the Razorbacks had beaten LSU. Of course, the Tigers had just received their NCAA notice of allegations, long awaited notice of allegations in that FBI probe that has really been overshadowing Wade's entire career in Baton Rouge. Arkansas looked really good in that game against LSU, I thought, Andrew, and you kind of expected them to have a really nice weekend in Tampa, but then all of a sudden on Saturday they ran into a hot Texas A&M team. I think an A&M team that a lot of people feel really got robbed, from the NCAA tournament. They didn't get to go to March Madness because they lost to Tennessee in the SEC championship game. It was kind of a weird weekend for Arkansas, but in some ways, I think it was maybe a little bit of a blessing for the Razorbacks because I think, regardless of the sport, sometimes you can exert so much energy on that conference tournament that it can be to your detriment the following week when the NCAA tournament, the one that everybody really cares about and remembers, comes around. And so, in some ways, I think it might have been a blessing for Arkansas that they got a win under their belt and they got a little bit of a wake-up call against A&M that I think may help them in this Vermont game.
I think you're exactly right about the importance of the SEC tournament. I don't think they were really obviously they wanted to win the tournament, but I don't think the ultimate goal is to win the NCAA tournament or make it however far as they can go. And I think that you're exactly right when you said that they maybe needed that kind of kick in the butt that they got from A&M, the A&M loss. When it comes to March Madness tournament time, it's all about who's the hot team and who's playing well at the moment, not what they've done over the course of the season. And so they had that big stretch run where they won 14 of their 15 games, and you thought maybe they might have peaked a little too soon. And then they took the loss at A&M, and I think that's going to give them a chip on their shoulder moving forward.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it'll put a chip on their shoulder. Absolutely, because I mean they had, like Andrew said, they got their butt kicked against Texas A&M, and they kind of got punked in several key areas of the game. And the day before, after Arkansas beat LSU, I was just like, I wrote about how Arkansas is just a team that consistently and simply plays tough almost every game, and then they got out toughed the very next day, so it made me look brilliant. But I mean, it's kind of the SEC tournament's kind of one of those deals where if you're needing some wins to boost your resume, or if you need to straight up win the tournament, like it's a big deal. But if you're going into it like Arkansas was as a number 4 seed, a team that they could have lost to LSU by probably 10 points, they're still comfortably in the field. They may have dropped down a seed line perhaps, so maybe that's where it impacts you most. But I mean, you got to put all of your eggs in one basket for the NCAA tournament. Obviously, you'd like to win, but it just doesn't always shake out like that. Something that kind of aggravates me though is that you go to the tournament and fans obviously they want to win the thing, every now and then, and when Arkansas doesn't, and they kind of lose the way that they did against Texas A&M, maybe a little bit of doubt creeps in. But Arkansas is not going to be playing games at the SEC tournament the way it is the rest of the year. Like, you're going to have at least a day off in between, and then if you do make it to the second weekend, your next game comes after 4 or 5 days off, and then you get another day off after that game if you win it. So postseason time is just really interesting, but good for Arkansas to get Audice Toney back. I think that was really big, and he, outside of the one time I think against LSU, they had to come out and get that foot retaped. He didn't really show any signs of rust whatsoever, I didn't think.
It was kind of surprising to me. I almost thought Arkansas looked like the tired team in its game against A&M, even though the Aggies were playing their third game in 3 days, and one of those 3 games was an overtime game against Florida in the second round of the tournament. Arkansas just didn't look real fresh for that game, but like Scotty said, they don't have to do that anymore. There's going to be at least one day in between their games moving forward. I thought the A&M game, Scotty, kind of was the recipe for disaster for Arkansas, if you will, in the tournament. It's the one thing that I think could really be their Achilles heel this year. which is their depth. If you're not getting good play out of JD Note and you're not getting good play out of Jalen Williams, this isn't a very deep team where there are other players who are going to, take the bull by the horn, so to speak, and make up for that lost production. Stanley Amude, can give you a lot of points. He did in the A&M game, certainly, but not enough to make up for season worst games from Note and from Williams when you take into consideration that he had 5 turnovers in that game. Note scored a season low 5 points. And really, one of the things that I thought was troublesome for Arkansas and Tampa was JD Note's foul trouble. In the first half of the 2 games against LSU and A&M, he committed 5 personal fouls. And I thought it was kind of ironic that at halftime of the LSU game, Eric Musselman was asked about sitting him, and he said, "I never play a guy that's got 2 personal fouls in the first half." And then the next day, their offense is so poor that he commits his second personal foul with 11 and a half minutes. And by 7.5 minutes, he's back in there. And that's why he had 3 fouls at halftime.
Yeah, Eric's 2 foul participation is extremely low, and that's something that you can monitor on KenPom. I think it's the percentage of available minutes that a player plays in a half or in a first half. I think with 2 fouls, and it's somewhere around 10%. So it's very low. It probably rose with the number of minutes that JD played in the first half against A&M with 2 fouls. I just thought overall, just A&M just seemed like a more desperate team. Like they looked like they had a lot more to play for, and sometimes like that's just kind of all a team needs is just just something to play for. Arkansas, clearly they want to win the tournament, but they more than anything else, they probably just want to get to the NCAA tournament and make their noise there. A&M's, I mean, they were playing for their tournament lives, beat Arkansas, still didn't make it into the tournament, so that's kind of kicking the gut for them. But that A&M game, I think you're right. Just about it was kind of just a perfect mix of just everything going wrong. And I got an interesting tweet the other day. Last season, Seth and I talked to the founder of ShotQuality.com, and Texas A&M just kind of had everything rolling for it. Like it was like 50-50 balls became 80-20 balls, and the ball just bounced their way. They just out hustled Arkansas in so many different areas, but they also, I think they scored 9 more points than expected on finishes around the rim, which means, they were making some pretty difficult shots that were contested that they normally, don't make, but that's just kind of the role that they were on. And they scored 6 more points than expected on threes too. So you look at that, it's, 15 more points, and, take those away, it's a completely different ball. But yeah, you're right. Like Arkansas's got to have JD and Jalen play well. Like neither one of those guys outside of JD played outside of JD against LSU. I would say, although he didn't shoot the ball great, he got to the free throw line a ton, which helped him. Then he had another scoring spurt, but they need those 2 guys to play really well, obviously. And you mentioned Stan. He's a guy that is a big time scorer at his previous school, but also to your point, like he's not a guy either that I don't think he's going to be like the number 1 option on your offense, or he hasn't shown the capability to do that, at this SEC level. So that's a little bit concerning, but Arkansas's been really good taking everything one game at a time, and in the postseason, it just comes down to value and possession, and just being smart with each trip down the floor. And I think JD, after fouling out against Baylor last year and the foul trouble he had in the SEC tournament, I think they're really, really going to be on him. Just about, man, you just got to play just much more aware defensively and offensively too. When he attacks the rim.
I can almost guarantee that Musselman has drilled that into JD Note's head coming into March Madness, that he cannot get those early fouls that he was picking up in the SEC tournament. So I don't think I would assume we wouldn't see that. But I think when you talk about Arkansas's depth, the word that comes to my mind is streaky. And I think kind of each and every one of their role players can pop off and give you something on one night, and then you look up and they're got an empty box score the next night. I mean, Chris Likes is maybe the human embodiment of the word streaky. I mean, he gave you 15 and 18 against Tennessee and LSU, and then he thought maybe he's rounding into form at just the right time, and he has a dud against A&M with 1 point. And so I think for Arkansas, the key is to get those kind of hot and cold guys all on the same page. And I mean, to me, they're just as likely to get bounced in the first round as they are to make it to an Elite Eight, just because they have such inconsistent players.
Let's look ahead to Vermont now. This is a team that caught my eye over the weekend because of the margin of victory that it had in its conference tournament championship game. I think Scotty, correct me if I'm wrong, did they win by 39 points in the America East championship game?
Yeah, they won all three of their games in their conference tournament by at least 30, not nail biters.
It reminds me a little bit of what Arkansas did in their last Southwest Conference tournament, where they beat everybody by 30 or more points. They beat Rice and A&M and Texas, if I believe, that weekend, all by 30 plus points. It makes you wonder about the quality of the teams that they're playing. You know, the America East, you hear the conferences, below the Power Five, or in basketball, maybe the Power Six when you consider the Big East. You hear the conferences referred to a lot as mid-major. I would say the America East is probably a low-major conference, but Vermont, to its credit, has won a lot of games to the point that, and it's got a little bit of a reputation too. I think this is their 8th NCAA tournament in the last 20 years, and so it's to the point that a lot of times when they get into the tournament, they get on the high side for the teams that are outside the Power Five. So they're a 13 seed in this tournament, but you wonder about the quality of the competition that they played. They haven't lost in regulation since December the 7th against Providence. I think they've only lost one other game since then. It was an overtime game. Really just ran through their conference almost like a knife through butter. What do you expect from Vermont in this game? And do you think it's a team that can challenge Arkansas? Certainly, I think any team in the tournament can challenge, but I wonder how much you think they're going to be able to challenge Arkansas, Scotty.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that Vermont is going to present Arkansas, like you can look at all the things that Vermont does well, and you can certainly point to their 3-point shooting, which is, I mean, it was ridiculous in conference play. They shot 41% from three, and they had a handful of guys shoot almost 40% or over 40% from three for the season. It's just some of those numbers are pretty absurd. But Eric Musselman, like, just a couple minutes after the announcement was made of who Arkansas was playing and where they were going, he was talking about the first thing he mentioned after the 3-point shooting was the pace that Vermont plays. They're going to be very, very methodical, and it's probably one of those teams that if you looked at a website like Shot Quality, they probably take really, really good shots, but I think they're probably able to get tons and tons of really good looks because defenses aren't exactly inside their jerseys when they're taking these looks. And I wouldn't imagine, I haven't done much research on the America East, but I don't imagine there's too many defensive juggernauts in that league, just given the way that Vermont ran through it. But at the same time, man, like you can take all the good shots you want, you still got to make them, and Vermont made them at a really, really high level. And so Arkansas is going to have to be really, really aware, and defend the 3-point line with some urgency. And I think the most interesting matchup that we're going to see is Jalen Williams against Ryan Davis, their 2-time conference player of the year. I think he's won it back-to-back years. Like, Arkansas is used to playing Jalen Williams in kind of a drop coverage and pick and roll, just because some of the bigs, even though they are skilled in the SEC, they're not really perimeter oriented. Ryan Davis will hurt you from three, and so that's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. And even beyond Jalen, like, Kamani Johnson is going to have to do the same thing. I just think the athleticism and the toughness and physicality that Arkansas can bring, I think that's going to wear down on Vermont over time, because they probably haven't seen a team like Arkansas since they played Providence back in December.
To me, one of the keys to the game is going to be how Arkansas can use their length and size to their advantage. Just going through the Vermont roster, they don't have a ton of guys. They got a couple 6'8", but 6'8", 6'9" seems to be the tallest they have. I think Arkansas has a major size advantage with Jalen Williams inside at 6'10", and I think that they get good rebounding from their guards in Note and Devo Davis. And so I think, like you said, Vermont has to miss their shots, but if they do miss the shots, I assume that Arkansas should be able to hold their own on the glass and not give them good second chance looks.
It's interesting, if you read Bob's story on the website today, he found some quotes from Vermont's coach after they won the America East Championship game. the other day. I think in the past, they've played a team like Florida State in the NCAA tournament. Florida State's just known for they mass produce guys that are like 6'8" or 6'7" to 6'9", and they got like 8 foot wingspans, and they're really athletic and all that. And they've got some real size to them. I think Vermont's coach, I mean, he basically said that, Arkansas doesn't have that, sheer size involved, like in mass, on its roster. So I think he thinks that, Vermont's going to have, a pretty good chance to compete with Arkansas on the interior. Just another thing to my point on, Ryan Davis against Jalen Williams. Jalen has been awesome this year, defending 2-point shots inside the arc. Like, he's held teams like under 37% when he's the nearest defender. Ryan Davis finished 80% of his shots within 4 feet of the rim this year. So that right there might be that might determine the outcome of the game. In my mind, I don't think there's any doubt about that. That's at least, one of the top 2 or 3 things to watch out for.
The Basketball Podcast of Mid-America is brought to you by Landers Toyota of Northwest Arkansas. Visit their showroom at 411 South Metro Parkway in Rogers or online at landerstoyotanwa.com.
For all your automotive needs, shop Landers Toyota NWA in Rogers, where we guarantee you the best buying experience and best service after the sale in Arkansas. Landers Toyota NWA in Rogers.
WholeHogSports.com has the largest, most experienced staff of reporters covering sports in Arkansas. Football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. You'll find it at WholeHogSports.com. The website includes up-to-minute news, daily commentaries, and award-winning photography from the staffs of Hogs Illustrated and the Democrat Gazette. For subscriptions, call 1-800-757-6277. That's 1-800-757-6277. Or visit us online today. WholeHogSports.com.
Want more coverage of your home team? Download the Whole Hog Sports Video on Demand app. Check out the Fan Zone and get up-to-the-minute videos, podcasts, and features on football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. Search for Whole Hog Sports on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire at home. And take it with you on the go by downloading it for your mobile device in your app store. The Whole Hog Sports Video on Demand app. Get it today.
Scotty said earlier that J.D. Notae was announced third-team All-America by the Associated Press this week. It's the 4th consecutive year that Arkansas has had a player on the AP All-America team, but the first in that time frame where the player was not on the honorable mention. Mason Jones was honorable mention in 2020, Daniel Gafford in 2019, and Moses Moody a year ago. The last time Arkansas actually had a player make one of the AP's first, second, or third teams was Bobby Portis in 2015. J.D. Notae on the third team this year. And it's really kind of a rarity to see a player make the AP All-America team at Arkansas. The AP All-America team is the oldest continuous All-America team that there is in college basketball. But since 1948, there have only been 18 individuals who have made the AP All-America team. There have been 23 combined All-Americans because you've had some players like Sidney Moncrief and Corliss Williamson, Scotty Thurman, Todd Day, who made it on there multiple times. But Scotty, kind of like what we talked about last week, that you've got Notae and Williams having this historic kind of twosome season that we haven't seen since Corliss and Scotty in the mid-90s. It's another illustration that we're seeing a really special season for Razorback basketball, having a player that's on the third team All-America. You just don't see that very often for the Razorbacks.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And I mean, it's I feel like it's pretty rare that one player gets multiple, All-America honors in the same season. Like JD was, third team by the Sporting News, earlier this month. And I think the Field of 68, which I think Jeff Goodman and some of those guys are a big part of, they named JD an All-American too. And Jeff Goodman was out kind of in front of all the voting for these postseason awards and stuff. Like, after, I think it may have taken Jeff Goodman until the Kentucky game to like give JD Notae his flowers, so to speak. But yeah, JD's made a lot of noise this year, and I just think it's been crazy to me to just kind of follow him since, I remember at a certain point, I think during Eric's first season, maybe when Isaiah Joe was injured and Arkansas was losing, was the year that JD was redshirting, and so things kind of get a little bit stale in terms of like the day-to-day coverage of maybe a losing team. And so you kind of check in on guys like JD and just kind of see how they're doing. And Eric would say that his 3-point shot's really coming along and he's scoring in bunches and doing all these different things, but he's a little bit out of control at times. Maybe need to reel him in a little bit. Um, to go from that to an All-American in a couple of years is pretty special, and that just tells you a lot about the drive that JD has. Not coming from a lot when he was growing up, and I think he's really bought in to and trusted the people that have his back a lot. And Eric Musselman, more than I think anybody in the program, loves JD and has his back, and he's really guided him kind of in this development into one of the best players in the country. And JD's just like, he doesn't want to make anything about himself. He's kind of like Jalen Williams in that way. Like if you ask JD to talk about himself, he's going to give you the Jalen Williams answer. It's just like, I just want to help my team win, do whatever I can to help us win games. And it's just, those two guys they're kind of on a special ride. And JD's got to see, like, he's got the option to come back next season. I don't know that he's necessarily going to do that, just because his role, I feel like, on the team would change with so much young fresh talent coming in, just in terms of the freshman class. But Eric Musselman's going to hit the portal again, like that, you can guarantee that. And so it'd be interesting to see what kind of decision he makes. But I mean, if this is his last season, he's made it a pretty special one. And certainly he's been a really, really, really huge part of some really big wins, and wins that fans will remember for a really long time.
Yeah, we talked earlier about Arkansas's depth and how crucial the role players would be in determining their success in the tournament. But I think it's safe to say that this Razorback basketball team is going to go as far as JD Note and Jalen Williams take them in the tournament. And every March Madness, there seems to be that one guy that just has a standout individual performance and kind of wills his team to victory almost on his own, and has that kind of Kemba Walker moment where he just guides the team to victory. And I'm not saying JD Note is going to do that, but he is a guy that has that capability and that scoring potential to just go off for a 30-point game and kind of just take control.
It's going to be super interesting. I think Jalen, I think he showed some signs of like the ability, like that he showed last year during their tournament run, that he had the potential to be a really unique, special player. I mean, it may have been just like, I remember first and foremost, like the outlet pass that he made to Devo against Texas Tech for the dunk. I remember talking to Jalen's mom, I think a couple of days after that game, and got some background on Jalen. I was like, tell me about that pass. Like, how can he make that pass? And it's because he played baseball when he was little. He was a third baseman and had a really good arm then. And I found out this year that Jalen's dad, Michael, told me that when Jalen is really off topic here, but Jalen, when he was playing baseball when he was little, parents on other teams would look at their schedule and make sure not to park their car in the parking lot behind the field that Jalen was playing on, because he was, really good player. I mean, those are the kinds of stories that kind of pop up when guys have their moment in March. And I think Jalen can have more this year just because he's got experience. And I think his confidence is, even after 3 games where he hasn't scored in double figures, after I think he scored 15 or 16 in a row, or he did that 15 or 16 times in a row, he's got the potential to do it again. And Arkansas straight up needs him to. And they need the Jalen that was the dominant, consistent force on both ends to come back to, take them where they want to go.
I agree with Andrew's point. It seems like in the tournament, the teams that win always have a really good scoring guard, somebody who can take over the games. And, Note would certainly potentially fit that bill for Arkansas. Back when I was like Scotty and taking early morning flights to the NCAA tournament a long time ago, I was in Raleigh and I saw it happen when Stephen Curry was at Davidson. They were playing, they played Georgetown and Gonzaga at the same site that Arkansas was playing Indiana and North Carolina. And in those 2 games, Curry scored 30 points against Georgetown, and he scored 40 points against Gonzaga. Or maybe I've got it backward. Maybe it was 30 points against, but it was 30 and 40. I remember that very vividly. I remember thinking, this is a pretty good little college player, not knowing that, he's going to become Steph Curry. I don't know if I could have ever envisioned that. But it seems though that you've got to have a really good guard, Scotty, and you've got to have experience. I mean, in this era of one and done, I guess we're probably about a dozen years into it now. You just haven't seen a whole lot of one and done teams win national championships. Kentucky did it the year they had Anthony Davis. I think Duke did it one year. Kansas has gotten to the championship game some years, although Kansas isn't so much a one and done program. They have those, but Kansas recycles players a little bit better than the other blue bloods do. North Carolina, when they won the championship in 2017, there were a lot of older veteran players on that team for Roy Williams. You've got Arkansas in the tournament, and you've got Note and Williams and Devo Davis. They've got that tournament experience. You've got some older players like Stanley Amude and Trey Wade are going to be playing in the tournament for the first time, but they've got some experience. I wonder how much you think the experience that those guys who were part of that team last year that got to the Elite Eight, and some of the older players they're now in the program who haven't been in the tournament. I wonder collectively how much you think Arkansas's experience helps this weekend.
Yeah, I think it definitely helps a little bit just in terms of like being on that stage and being on that stage and knowing that if we don't kind of get things together right now, like we're done. But I also think on the other hand, like having the experience that those guys gained last season, it's valuable, but at the same time, this is going to be a different environment in the tournament this year. Like there were hardly any fans at games in the tournament last season. And this season, I feel like fans are probably going to turn out, in droves, just because, a lot of them probably feel like they missed out on that, full tournament experience. The players missed out on it too. So it's going to be different all the way around, but I don't think you can put a price ever on postseason experience. Like Devo has not had the year that we thought he would have. I don't think by any stretch of the imagination, but maybe just being back in this moment, like brings some of that back for him. I mean, talk about a dude that was instrumental in what they did last year. Like I every time I think about Devo in the tournament, I go back to like that spark that he gave Arkansas against Colgate late in the half, where he came up with a couple steals that led to buckets, and it just kind of completely flipped the game on its head. Arkansas, I think, went from like down 17 or 15 points to up a couple possessions, and he keyed that. And so maybe he can, latch back onto some of that magic, so to speak. And then obviously the shot he hit against Oral Roberts, like those moments are good to have played in. Maybe you can carry it into this season. And I'm sure that like the last experience JD had is going to fuel him. I don't think there's any doubt about that, because he knows that he can play on this stage and in these moments against an eventual national championship caliber team. And I'm sure he's going to do everything he can to stay on the floor and give Arkansas the best shot to win.
Yeah, I think it's one thing going into the tournament with a team full of one and done guys where they're kind of 18-year-old kids getting thrown into the fire, so to speak, at the tournament, versus coming into the tournament with guys like Stanley Amude and Audis Tony, who are in their fourth and fifth years of college basketball. They don't have the NCAA tournament experience, so to say, but they've played a lot of college basketball. And I think maybe the fact that they've played so many seasons without reaching the tournament, that maybe this is just extra motivation for them, because they know they've spent all that time and now they're finally here.
Now, real quick before we get out of here, New Mexico State and UConn, we mentioned, will play the winner of Arkansas, Vermont. One of those two teams will. New Mexico State, 26-6 this year. They won the WAC conference tournament with a 66-52 win over Abilene Christian in Las Vegas last weekend. UConn, 23-9. They're the 5 seed in the region. The Huskies, of course, from the Big East, blue blood basketball program. No two ways about it. They beat Auburn this year. That was the only team that had beaten Auburn up until Arkansas beat them in Fayetteville. I watched a UConn game a few weeks ago where they hit a buzzer beater to beat Villanova on their home court, and then they went to the Big East tournament and they lost to Nova by 3 points at Madison Square Garden. Real quick, guys, you think Arkansas can make it out of the weekend and potentially to play Gonzaga in the Sweet 16 in San Francisco?
Yeah, I could certainly see that happening. I think if Arkansas does play UConn, that's going to be a war on the glass. Because I'm looking at UConn's KenPom page as a number 2 offensive rebounding team in the country. Arkansas's, this season, I feel like they've been, pretty solid on the defensive glass. So that might be something to watch for. I think UConn, I think, is obviously the biggest threat. Like, I think Arkansas will get past Vermont, but UConn is they're the biggest threat to Arkansas this weekend. They've proven that they can play with and beat some really good teams.
Just going off, as I was watching the SEC tournament, the broadcast just kept saying how great Eric Musselman was at finding the opponent's best player and just erasing him from the game plan. And so when I look at UConn, and they have a couple guards in the backcourt that are averaging 13 and 15 a game, but they've got a forward in Adama Sanogo who averages 15 and 9. He doesn't shoot the 3, but he's a interior presence. And I think if they can keep him from hurting them inside, then they can shift their defensive focus to the perimeter shooting, and they can be successful.
We'll be back with another basketball podcast to Mid-America next week, regardless of the outcome this week in Buffalo. We'll either be looking back at the Razorback season or looking ahead to a Sweet 16 matchup in San Francisco. Also hope you'll check out the Whole Hog Baseball podcast hosted by me and Bubba Carpenter. This week we'll be looking ahead to the Razorbacks SEC series opener against Kentucky this weekend at Baum-Walker Stadium. You can find all of our podcasts by searching Whole Hog Radio, that's 3 words, WHOLE HOGRADIO, on Apple, Spotify, or in most other podcast stores. Leave us a rating or a review and help others find our podcast. Go to wholehogsports.com this week for all of Scotty's coverage from Buffalo. Bob Holt will also be there this week. Lots of coverage leading up to Arkansas, Vermont on Thursday at 8:20. The game will be televised by TNT. Of course, we'll have you covered before, during, and after all of the Razorbacks basketball games in the NCAA tournament. For Scotty Bordelon and Andrew Joseph, I'm Matt Jones. We appreciate you joining us, and we'll see you next week on the Basketball Podcast of Mid-America.
The proceeding has been a production of WholeHogSports.com. Look for our latest podcasts on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast store. And visit us anytime at WholeHogSports.com for the latest news and commentary.